Big more content for Lord of the Rings Rise to War. So this video I am going to do something different. I am going to talk about the commanders and how they interact with each other and counters and things like that. But keep in mind, these are just some of my opinions, and I'm trying to think of free-to-play players, um, newcomers, things like that. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about Gimli. Okay, Gimli with his unique gains Keen Eye. And what Keen Eye is, it ignores the target evasion. So that is a very good skill to have if you are fighting against an army that has, say, Gil or Undying in it, because both of those cast an evade. A couple others are like Boromir, Haragon, and those are a lot less used. So the Keen Eye, like I said, it will ignore the evasion. So if you're fighting against a Gil or an Undying formation, it's great to have. The other commanders that have it are Aragon with his Strider skill, and this skill gains Keen Eye. Okay, and it's a skill that fires off in round 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So that helps. Now let me also go to Aragon King of Men is another one that has it. Same thing on his R2 skill Strider, gains Keen Eye. So that's one way of getting through evasion. One thing to think about though is, say that you're running Gil as your leader and you have Aragon King of Men in that formation. Well, if you're fighting evil, they have a lot of madness. So, say they madden Aragon. Well, your Gil is offering evade for 3 formations that have elf units, which in this case, you would have an elf on Aragon. Well, because of that, if Aragon gets maddened, he's going to hit somebody in your army. So Keen Eye is a good skill, but you also have to be careful what you run. So those are some things to think about. Falcon, I'm going to talk about him really quick. Falcon is a good tank. He is a great tank, actually. But he is limited to where he needs to use dwarf units. Not him, but the army does. Right here with Rainsguard, it grants damage taken by dwarf units in 3 allied formations, minus 30% when it's full. Okay, well, it's also modified by command. So, in the army of 4 formations, 3 of them will get this skill. So think of it as a white council for dwarves. Now, hit this skill. For each formation comprised of dwarf units in your army, the defense of the commander's formation is plus 10. So, with this being said, when you're using Falcon, you're going to want to use Falcon with provoking or protecting, taunting troop, like Swan Knights, Mountain Trolls, Great Beasts, and then everybody else in the formation you're going to want to have them to have dwarves. So the other way to do that is melee units. Put a melee unit on Falcon, like a Cataphract or something like that, and then put rams or axe throwers, something like that, on your other ones. So, we talked about them. Let's see. Who else do we want to talk about? I am in a roleplay server, so at this moment, Good Side is the ones that are available to me. There's a few others in here. Like I said, Gil we talked about a little bit. Okay. His main skills are Kinley Kin and High King. Kinley Kin grabs evade. 3 elf units. So he's the same thing as Falcon, pretty much. You're going to want to run him with like a Swan Knight or something beefy. And then in your rest of your army, you're going to want elves. So the elves can get evade for 2 rounds, and then there's also this skill that increases their attack and defense as well to elf units in 3 formations. So those are a couple. Let me go to evil. I'm going to show off Undying, which I do not have unlocked yet. So Undying's big skills, where is it? Right here. The Undead Commander. It grants 2 allied formations a 90% chance to evade damage taken from each of the first 5 hits when it's fully upgraded. And then he also has a really big healing skill that takes effect in round 5. So you're starting to see a lot more Undyings in people's formations. So again, this is a skill that where Kenai will come into effect, where you want them to evade or to ignore the evade. Now I'm going to talk about Sauron, which is definitely 100% in the meta and in most evil people's formations. And in non-role play, you'll find Sauron in most of the formations as well. And the reason for this is a couple of his skills. The Deceiver is one. Damage received by 3 enemy formations plus 10% and it's modified. Well, also right there, he grants Madness. The Enemy is another one. And this is a debuff skill. Attack, defense, and focus of 3 enemy commanders. 15% modified by stun. And then at level 10, it also affects all 4 enemy commanders. So this is actually a huge skill. So let's see, where are we modifying? At level 10, it gets 3% per 100 focus. And most people are running 2 to 300 focus, whatever. Well, if you're taking 25% off of, say, your damage dealer, say Dane, for instance, and he has 200 commander attack. Well, 20% of 200 is minus 40. So he'll be down to 160, which is kind of huge. Another one is, say, let's go with Gandalf the White. Same thing with his White Council. Well, if his Sauron is faster than your Gandalf the White, Sauron's going to inflict the enemy skill, and it's going to reduce how much White Council protection each of your formations is giving. Now, one way around this is commanders that need command. So, as you see, it affects attack, defense, and focus. Witch King also has a skill just like this as well. Is it this one? Yep. The Lord of Minas Morgul, where he does the same thing. He subtracts attack, focus, and defense, and it's modified by command. So they have a lot of debuffs. Well, if you're playing non-role play, one way around this is Shadow. And I'm going to show you his skill, Hunting Expert. This skill most likely is going to fire after the debuff. So this is a way to get some of your attack back, because at level 10, each time damage is dealt, you get plus 10 attack, and it stacks up to 8 times. So that's one way to get around it. Another is using commanders that use command. Okay, so I'm just going to go to Boromir for this instance. So these kind of skills: Horn of Gondor, the attack of 3 allied formations, plus 18 for 1 round, and it's modified by command. So something like this. Well, if he's going to be loaded up on command. Sauron hits your Dane, and like I said before, say Dane had 200, he's down to 160. Well, right here, attack of 3 allied formations, plus 18 modified by command. And going low end with purple gear, I believe he can get 300 command just from purple gear. So we're going to use that. And he gets plus 3 per 100. So that would be 9. So he could get, your Dane could get 27 of it back, of attack added back on. So then he goes from 160 back up to 187 before he acts. Yes, he's not back up to the 200 range where you want to be, but it's a lot closer. So these skills kind of help. And that's why it's important to not have just damage dealers. You need supports in your formation as well, not only to help your buffs, but also for evade or adding defense, things like that. And again, like this skill, it affects 4 formations when it's fully upgraded. So that's a good thing to think about as well. Also, he has an evade stat, but being an epic commander, his percentage for the evade taking place is only 45% when it's maxed. So we talked about those. Now, let's talk about Eowyn, okay? She, first and foremost, is going to be a support. Unless you are whaled out and you have her ascended to mythic, you have her relic, you have high respects, and you have all the gear in the world, she is going to be a support. But it's also important to think about how she is the support. So there's a couple skills. And this one is medium units and 3 allied formations have a 40% chance to gain plus 42 defense each round, and it's modified. Chance increases to 50. But at level 10, the effects affects units of all physique types. So it doesn't matter small, medium, large. So that's a good thing. But this is her other support skill. White Lady of Rohan restores 65% hit points to mounted units in 3 allied formations for each round. And then also, mounted units in the commander's formation gain stun immunity, which is kind of a good thing to have for, say, your B team. But because both of her support is steered towards cavalry, medium units, I shouldn't, mounted units for this one and medium units on this one to start until it's upgraded. You want to run her with cavalry. So she would be, with like Theo, Denethor, Emerald Hall, Aomor is another one that has buffs for cavalry. Okay? Mounted units. And then his relic has buffs for mounted units. So you also have to think when you're building your formations, who works good together, the synergy they have. And then also think about who you're going to be fighting. If you're going to be fighting predominantly evil, because if you're fighting predominantly evil, you're going to probably run into a lot of Sarumans, some Witch Kings. Did I say Sauron or Saruman? Either or, both of them. So kind of think about those things if you're going to need to buff your attack, if you're going to need to try to evade, if you're going to need keen eye because you're trying to fight against evade. So it's important to think about those kind of things. Let's see, who else can we talk about on this video? There's certain... Okay, let's talk about healing for a minute. Healing is not as good as it should be, in my opinion. But it is still in the game. It doesn't work as quite well as it should, but it does work sometimes. So I'm going to use Radagast, for instance. So on him, he's got 2 healing skills. And they're actually really good healing skills. Like this one, restores 150% hit points to 3 allied formation units. And that fires off in rounds 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Well, that's great because round 4 is usually after a lot of the big damage skills take place. Like Durant Blood, for instance, takes place in 3, 6, and 9. So this is going to help there. It's modified by focus. And this is another one. For the first 3 rounds, restores 200% hit points to 3 allied formation units. and it extends to 4 rounds. So, healing is not a bad thing. It's not really that good in PvP, unfortunately, but it is good against tiles, PvE, so player versus environment. So that's another thing to think about when you're building armies. Are you using them for player versus player, or are you using them for tiles and mobs? So pretty much that's all I got for this video. I hope some of the commanders I talked about, it makes sense of what you're looking for when you're building the army, what their pros and cons are, things to look for. And again, like I said, I know this was a little different kind of video, and some of it's rambling, but some of it's very informative. So, as always, make the most out of what you got.